In 47 seconds, the last truck in that convoy will disappear. Evelyn Mercer's voice was quiet, almost lost beneath the radio static and the low hum of the operations room. But every face turned toward her. On the wall-size monitor, 6 transport vehicles crawled through Dry Widow Pass, their blue tracking icons moving between narrow ridgelines 20 miles north of Red Mesa Base. Lieutenant Connor Hale stood at the center console with one hand resting beside the transmission switch. He looked at Evelyn's faded warehouse shirt, the inventory badge clipped to her pocket, and the thin streak of dust across one sleeve. Then he gave a short, humorless laugh. "You're just a warehouse clerk," he said. "Let trained officers handle the field." A few soldiers glanced at one another. Someone near the back lowered his eyes to hide a smile. Evelyn did not defend herself. She did not mention the fuel discrepancy, the missing radio batteries, or the black mineral dust she had found beneath the lead vehicle that morning. She simply watched the clock above the tactical display. 43 seconds. The convoy entered the narrowest section of the pass. Its first vehicle slowed beside an abandoned utility truck angled across the road. Hale leaned toward the screen. "Routine obstruction," he said. Evelyn's gray-blue eyes stayed on the rear of the formation. It was placed there to move them left. 35 seconds. The first truck turned around the obstruction. The others followed, shifting toward the canyon wall where the satellite signal weakened. A communications specialist adjusted his headset. Kodiak 2 maintained spacing. Confirm visual contact. The reply came through broken and thin. Evelyn moved closer to the paper map spread beneath the console. Her finger stopped over an unmarked drainage channel running behind the western ridge. 28 seconds. Outside the operations building, a Mustang struck one hoof against the hard-packed ground. Flint had been restless since sunrise, his dark ears fixed toward the northern hills. Evelyn heard the sound through the half-open door, steady and hollow, like a warning repeated by something that did not need words. 21 seconds. The icon representing the lead truck flickered. Hale's expression tightened, but his voice remained firm. Signal distortion. Nothing more. Evelyn looked at the final truck. They'll separate the rear vehicle first. 12 seconds. Radio static filled the room. A driver reported that the road behind them was no longer clear. Hale reached for the microphone. Evelyn watched the clock. 7, 6, 5. The final blue icon shuddered once. 4, 3, 2. Then it vanished. No alarm sounded. No one moved. The empty space on the monitor seemed larger than the entire room. Hale's hand remained above the transmission switch, but he did not press it. Evelyn pulled a blank supply form from the nearest clipboard, turned it over, and began drawing the canyon from memory. "They are not lost," she said. "Not yet." 6 hours earlier, Evelyn Mercer had been standing beneath the corrugated steel roof of Warehouse 3, counting sealed crates while the desert wind pushed red dust through the open loading bay. Red Mesa Base was already awake. Diesel engines rumbled beyond the fence. Forklifts moved between marked lanes, and soldiers called out inventory numbers over the metallic clatter of equipment. Evelyn worked without hurry. Her clipboard rested against one forearm, and her pencil moved in short, precise marks. Most people saw boxes, fuel cans, medical kits, and radio batteries. Evelyn saw patterns. She noticed when a shipment arrived 3 minutes later than expected. She noticed when a seal had been replaced. She noticed when the weight printed on a manifest did not match the way a crate settled on a pallet. That morning, 3 details refused to fit. A case of long-range radio batteries had been moved from row 7 to the Kodiak 2 staging area without a transfer order. 2 transport vehicles had been issued enough fuel for a route nearly 40 miles longer than the one listed in the operations plan. And a supply form carried a handwritten approval from a sergeant whose name did not appear anywhere on the current duty roster. Evelyn checked each item twice. Then she checked them a third time. Specialist Mia Torres watched from the next aisle while tightening a strap across a medical crate. "You think somebody made a mistake?" she asked. Evelyn looked toward the loading doors, where morning light cut through the dust in pale gold bands. "Mistakes usually lean in different directions," she said. "These all lean north." Mia followed her gaze, but saw only the outer yard and the distant line of hills. Near the fence, Flint stood beneath a narrow shade awning. The dark brown Mustang had been calm when Evelyn arrived before sunrise, but now his black mane lifted in the dry wind, and his ears remained fixed toward the northern ridge. He stamped once, then shifted away from the gate as a reconnaissance truck rolled past. Evelyn set down the clipboard and walked outside. The vehicle had been washed recently, but a thin line of dark powder still clung beneath the front wheel well. She crouched and rubbed a small amount between her fingers. The grains were fine, almost black, and sharp enough to catch the light. The soil around Red Mesa was rust red. This dust came from volcanic rock near the eastern entrance of Dry Widow Pass. That route had been closed to training traffic for months. Lieutenant Connor Hale crossed the yard with a tablet tucked beneath one arm, speaking quickly to Sergeant Noah Briggs about departure timing. Hale was young, polished, and determined to prove that his first convoy command would run without delay. Evelyn stood and stepped into his path. "Lieutenant, one of your vehicles has been through Dry Widow Pass." Hale glanced at the dust on her fingertips, then at the warehouse badge on her shirt. "That is not possible. The road residue says otherwise." Briggs slowed, but Hale did not. "The route was inspected yesterday." "By whom?" Evelyn asked. Hale stopped then, more irritated by the question than concerned by the answer. Behind him, engines started one by one. Flint lifted his head sharply. Evelyn looked past the lieutenant toward the convoy forming in the yard. Important enough to question. Hale studied Evelyn for a moment, then looked toward the convoy as if the engines could answer for him. 6 transport vehicles waited in 2 clean rows, their tan paint bright beneath the desert sun. Soldiers moved around them with practice speed, checking straps, mirrors, tires, and communication equipment. Hale had spent 3 weeks preparing for this exercise. Every departure time had been calculated. Every checkpoint had been entered into the digital route system. Colonel Marcus Reed would be observing from the operations center, and Hale intended to show him that Kodiak 2 could cross 48 miles of difficult terrain without a single delay. A warehouse employee holding dust between her fingers did not fit anywhere in that plan. The inspection team cleared the vehicles, Hale said. The route officer approved the movement schedule. "We leave in 12 minutes." Evelyn wiped the dar powder onto a clean cloth and folded it carefully. "Who was the route officer?" Hale turned to Sergeant Noah Briggs. Briggs opened the manifest on his tablet and scrolled through the authorization page. His expression changed almost too slightly to notice. "The approval is marked under Sergeant Daniel Voss." Mia Torres looked up from the medical crate. "Sergeant Voss transferred to Fort Carson last month." The yard seemed to quiet, though the engines were still running. Hale took the tablet from Briggs and examined the signature. Then someone used an old authorization code. "Administration will correct it after the convoy returns?" Evelyn asked. Hale's jaw tightened. "This is a training movement, not a criminal investigation." Evelyn did not argue. She walked to the second vehicle and checked the rear storage compartment. 2 sealed fuel containers had been secured beside emergency water and recovery equipment. The same arrangement appeared in the 4th vehicle. Extra fuel made sense on long missions. It did not make sense on a scheduled route with a refueling point less than 30 miles away. Briggs followed her. "How much farther would that supply carry us?" "About 40 miles beyond the planned route," Evelyn said. "Enough to reach the Northern Service Road." "That road is not part of the exercise." "Then why is your convoy prepared to use it?" No one answered. Flint struck the ground once beyond the fence. His ears remained pointed toward the hills, and a faint tremor moved through the muscles along his neck. Evelyn watched the Mustang, then turned toward a line of small flags above the warehouse roof. The wind had shifted east. Dust from the training range drifted low across the yard, but the black powder beneath the reconnaissance vehicle had stayed packed inside the wheel well. It had not blown there. The vehicle had carried it back. Hale checked his watch. 9 minutes remained. He could delay the departure and explain to Colonel Reed that an inventory clerk had raised concerns about dirt, fuel, and paperwork. Or he could trust the approved schedule and keep control of his first command. Pride made the decision before caution could speak. Sergeant Briggs, complete the final checks, Hale ordered. Kodiak 2 departs on time. Briggs hesitated, then nodded. Evelyn returned to her clipboard. Her pencil moved across the back of the manifest, marking the eastern entrance of Dry Widow Pass, the northern service road, and the narrow stretch where the canyon walls blocked radio signals. She had seen plans like this before. Not identical, but close enough. Someone had moved supplies, altered access records, and sent a vehicle through a closed route. Those were not separate mistakes. They were steps, and every step was leading the convoy toward the same narrow place. The final loading check should have taken 4 minutes. Evelyn made it last 6. She moved along the rear of the convoy while soldiers secured doors and called out seal numbers, her attention fixed on a gray communications crate strapped inside the third vehicle. Nothing about it looked unusual from 10 feet away. The casing was standard military issue, the corners were reinforced, and the weight label matched the equipment listed on the manifest. Yet a narrow strip of pale adhesive showed beneath the current routing tag. Someone had placed a new label over an older one. Evelyn reached beneath the cargo net and pressed one fingernail against the edge. The top label lifted without resistance. Underneath it, faded black letters identified a destination that had been abandoned nearly 2 years earlier. Observation Station Echo 9. Sergeant Briggs leaned closer. That station is closed. It sits above the eastern entrance to Dry Widow Pass, Evelyn said. Briggs looked toward Hale, who was speaking with the lead driver near the first vehicle. Could be an old crate that never got relabeled. Evelyn examined the metal latches. Fine black dust had collected inside both hinges. The same volcanic dust she had found beneath the reconnaissance truck. Then it should have been empty, she said. And it should not have arrived from a closed station this morning. Mia Torres checked the electronic inventory on her handheld device. The system says it came from Central Communications. Evelyn pointed to a small line of numbers stamped beside the handle. The crate had been scanned at 4:42 that morning, 40 minutes before Central Communications opened. Briggs removed his cap and rubbed one hand across his closely cropped hair. Who had access? Mia searched the log. Temporary authorization. No name attached. A forklift passed behind them, carrying another pallet toward Warehouse 3. Flint, tethered near the fence, stepped backward so suddenly that the lead rope pulled tight. His dark eyes were fixed on the crate. The Mustang lowered his head, drew in a long breath, and refused to move forward when a handler tried to guide him past the vehicle. "Come on, Flint," the handler said gently. The horse planted all 4 hooves. Evelyn walked to him and rested one hand against his neck. Beneath her palm, his muscles were rigid. Flint was not afraid of trucks. He had stood calmly beside helicopters, generators, and live training exercises. This was different. Evelyn followed the angle of his head and noticed a dark smear beneath the crate, where powder had fallen through the vehicle bed onto the concrete. She crouched again. Mixed with the volcanic dust were tiny dry fibers from desert sage, crushed flat and gray from heat. Sage did not grow near Central Communications. It covered the upper trail below Echo 9. Hale approached, his patience thinning. "Why has loading stopped?" Evelyn stood and held out the hidden label. "This crate came from a station that should be empty. It was scanned before the issuing office opened, and the authorization has no owner." Hale read the label, but his expression remained guarded. "We can inspect it after the exercise. By then it will be 20 miles north. It contains backup radio equipment." That is what the new label says. Hale looked at the sealed crate, then at the convoy clock mounted above the warehouse doors. 4 minutes remained before departure. Evelyn heard Flint breathe behind her, slow but uneasy. She turned the manifest over and drew a line from Echo 9 to the closed pass. The crate, the fuel, the false approval, and the black dust were no longer scattered irregularities. They formed a route. Someone had prepared the convoy to reach Dry Widow Pass before the convoy itself knew it was going there. Hale folded the old routing label once and handed it back to Evelyn. "You have found inconsistencies," he said, choosing the word carefully. "You have not found a threat. Around them, The convoy continued preparing to leave. Doors slammed. Engines deepened from idle to a steady growl. The lead driver raised one hand through the open window, waiting for the signal to move. Evelyn looked toward Flint. The Mustang had settled slightly beneath her touch, but he still would not cross the narrow strip of dark dust that had fallen behind the third vehicle. His nostrils widened each time the wind carried the scent toward him. Evelyn loosened the lead rope and guided him parallel to the loading lane. Flint followed without resistance. When she turned him toward the dust again, he stopped. Not from fear, from recognition. She had seen that response during long rides in the backcountry, when he caught the scent of water, smoke, or another animal long before she did. What is the horse supposed to prove? Hale asked. Evelyn did not look at him. She knelt beside the dark line and found something the concrete had hidden at first glance. Two narrow impressions pressed through the powder. Tire tread, smaller than the transport vehicles, but matching the reconnaissance truck parked near the far gate. She followed the marks for nearly 15 feet until they disappeared beneath fresh sand scattered by the morning wind. Sergeant Briggs came beside her. That truck was assigned to route inspection yesterday, and it went farther north than the report says, Evelyn replied. Mia opened the vehicle tracking record on her handheld device. The screen showed a clean route along the approved southern corridor, with no deviation toward Dry Widow Pass. Evelyn studied the timestamps. The truck appeared to travel 11 miles in less than 4 minutes, then remained at one coordinate for almost an hour. The tracking record was edited, she said. Hale crossed his arms. Or the system lost connection. A lost signal leaves a gap. This leaves a lot. Briggs looked toward the reconnaissance truck. Its driver was nowhere in the yard. Mia searched the duty roster again. The assigned driver called in sick before dawn. A temporary replacement signed it out. Name? Evelyn asked. Mia's thumb stopped over the screen. There is no name. The wind shifted harder across the base, lifting a thin curtain of red dust. Flint raised his head and turned toward the hills. Far beyond the warehouse roofs, a line of birds rose suddenly above the northern ridge, circled once, and scattered west. Evelyn watched their movement. Something had disturbed them near the pass. A vehicle, perhaps. Maybe several. Hale checked his watch again. Less than 2 minutes remained. Lieutenant, Briggs said, his voice lower now, we should hold the convoy until the route log is verified. Hale looked from Briggs to Mia, then to Evelyn. The delay would be recorded. Questions would follow. His first command would begin with hesitation before the vehicles had crossed the gate. The exercise area is controlled, he said. Observation teams are already in position. Evelyn stood slowly. Then contact Echo 9. Mia entered the frequency. Only static answered. She tried again, then switched to the backup channel. Nothing. A small change passed across Hale's face, gone almost before it appeared. Evelyn took the paper map from her clipboard and placed it against the side of the third vehicle. She marked Echo 9, the northern service road, and the signal-dead corridor between the canyon walls. Then she drew the approved route beside them. The two lines remained separate for most of the distance. Near mile marker 23, they almost touched. Someone does not need to change your orders, she said. They only need one reason to turn you here. Hale followed her pencil to the narrow junction. A blocked road. Evelyn nodded. Behind them, the convoy clock reached 0. The convoy clock reached 0, and Lieutenant Hale lifted his hand. 6 engines answer at once. The vehicles rolled forward in a slow line, tires grinding over the hard-packed yard as soldiers along the loading lane stepped aside. Sergeant Briggs remained beside Evelyn for one more second, watching the first truck approach the gate. Lieutenant, he called, we can still hold them. Hale turned without stopping the movement. For what? A horse that does not like dust? A mislabeled crate? A computer log that may have glitched? His voice carried across the yard, sharp enough to draw every nearby face. Evelyn stood beside the third vehicle with the paper map pressed against the metal panel. The dark route she had drawn ended at the narrow junction near mile marker 23. For a pattern, she said. Hale gave a tired smile. Patterns are not orders. A few young soldiers near the forklift exchanged glances. One of them muttered something about inventory workers planning maneuvers now. Another laughed under his breath. The sound spread just far enough to be heard, then stopped when Briggs looked toward them. Evelyn did not react. She had learned that laughter often arrived before fear, because people preferred amusement to the possibility that they had missed something important. Hale walked closer and lowered his voice, though not enough to make the moment private. Your responsibility is to count supplies and keep the warehouse accurate. Mine is to move this convoy. Evelyn met his eyes. Then move it somewhere else. The smile left his face. Behind him, the first vehicle passed through. The gate. The southern route is clear. It was clear yesterday. That is why it was approved. Evelyn folded the map along the line she had drawn. A route becomes dangerous long before the report admits it. Hale looked at her as if searching for the source of her certainty. He found only a quiet woman in a faded work shirt, dust on her hands, and no rank on her shoulders. Whatever question came to him, pride closed it before he could ask. He turned toward the convoy and signaled the drivers to continue. Flint paced once along the fence, then stopped with his head high. The Mustang watched the vehicles disappear beyond the outer barrier, one after another, until only a trail of pale dust hung above the road. Evelyn checked the time and wrote it on the back of the manifest. 7:46 in the morning. Departure confirmed. Mia Torres came to stand beside her. What happens now? Evelyn listened to the fading engines. At mile 19, they will receive a route update. Mia frowned. How could you know that? Because the extra fuel only matters if they leave the southern road. She marked another time beneath the first. At mile 23, something will block the approved route. Briggs looked down at the map. And if nothing does? Evelyn folded the paper again and slipped it into her pocket. Then I was wrong, and everyone comes home on schedule. She walked toward the operations building, Flint following along the fence line beside her. The laughter behind them had already faded. It had been easy to dismiss a warehouse clerk standing among crates. It would be harder once the radio began proving her right. The operations room smelled faintly of warm electronics and stale coffee. Evelyn entered without speaking, followed by Mia and Sergeant Briggs, while Flint remained outside the half-open door where the shade from the building reached across the packed earth. Lieutenant Hale arrived moments later, carrying his tablet and wearing the controlled expression of a man determined not to let doubt show in front of his team. On the main display, 6 blue icons moved steadily along the approved southern route. The convoy had reached mile 14. A communications specialist reported clear signals, normal spacing, and no mechanical issues. Hale looked toward Evelyn, still expecting the road to change. She placed the folded supply manifest beside the paper map. Yes, based on altered inventory records. Based on the reason they were altered. Hale turned back to the screen. Kodiak 2 is exactly where it should be. Evelyn checked the time. For now, at mile 17, the lead driver reported a construction marker ahead that did not appear on the route plan. It was only a temporary sign beside the shoulder, easy to dismiss. Hale ordered the convoy to continue. 2 minutes later, a second message came through. A civilian maintenance vehicle was parked near the center of the road, its hood raised, leaving enough space for one truck to pass at a time. The communications specialist zoomed in on the live image. Looks abandoned. Evelyn moved closer. Not abandoned. Positioned. Hale glanced at her. You cannot know that from one camera angle. The front wheels are turned toward the shoulder, but there are no tire marks behind it. It was placed there, not driven there. Briggs leaned toward the display. The road surface was pale and dry. No tracks led to the vehicle. Hale pressed the transmission switch. Kodiak 2, reduce speed and assess the obstruction. The response came through clearly at first, then weakened beneath a layer of static. The lead driver reported that the maintenance vehicle blocked the right side of the road. The left shoulder remained open. Evelyn unfolded the map and placed one finger near mile marker 23. That shoulder connects to the northern service road. Hale watched the lead icon begin to drift left. They're only moving around the obstruction. That is the route update. The room grew quiet. The first prediction had not arrived as an official order. It had arrived as a choice that looked harmless. The convoy passed the maintenance vehicle and continued north instead of returning to the southern lane. The icons remained visible, but the signal strength dropped by nearly 1/3. Evelyn pointed to the spacing between the third and fourth vehicles. They will widen the gap next. Halle från it. Why? Because the road narrows before the canyon wall. The front three will accelerate to clear the turn. The rear vehicles will slow. Less than a minute later, the distance between the two groups increased. The communications specialist removed one side of his headset. Signal delay from the rear vehicle. Hale stepped closer to the display. Kodiak 2, Titan formation. Static answered before a faint acknowledgement came through. Evelyn looked at the digital clock above the screen. The second prediction is already happening. Hale did not reply. On the monitor, the road curved between dark ridges, and the rear icon flickered once. Then again, Evelyn took a pencil and wrote 3 times on the supply form. First loss of route control. First communication delay. Estimated signal failure. The last time was 47 seconds away. 47 seconds remained. Evelyn set the pencil beside the map and watched the rear icon pulse against the dark outline of Dry Widow Pass. The communications specialist increased the signal gain, filling the room with a low wash of static. Lieutenant Hale stood with one hand above the transmission control, his shoulders rigid beneath his uniform. Kodiak 2, rear vehicle, confirmed status, he ordered. A broken voice answered, then vanished beneath interference. 40 seconds. Evelyn studied the distance between the convoy icons. The front 3 vehicles had cleared the bend. The fourth was entering the narrow corridor. The final 2 were nearly 200 yards behind, separated by the curve and a wall of volcanic rock. Tell the lead vehicle not to stop, she said. Hale did not look away from the screen. They need to regroup. Stopping is what the route was designed to make them do. 32 seconds. A warning light appeared beside the fourth icon. The communications specialist reported that the convoy had detected another obstruction ahead. Hale reached for the microphone, but Evelyn spoke first. If the lead truck breaks, the rear will be hidden from both the convoy and the base. Hale turned toward her. How do you know the timing? Evelyn watched the digital clock. Because the signal loss begins where the canyon narrows to less than 60 feet. At their current speed, the last vehicle reaches that line in 24 seconds. Briggs stepped closer to the paper map. The digital route does not show that narrowing. It was surveyed before the rock slide 3 years ago. 20 seconds. Hale transmitted new instructions, ordering the front vehicles to maintain motion and the rear pair to close the gap. The reply arrived late. On the main display, the fifth icon flickered, shifted several yards to the west, then corrected itself. The final icon dimmed. Mia Torres held her handheld device with both hands, watching the same weakening signal. 12 seconds, she whispered. No one laughed now. Hale pressed the transmission switch again. Kodiak 2-6, report. Static. 8 seconds. Outside, Flint struck one hoof against the ground. The sound carried through the open door, slow and hollow. 5 seconds. The rear icon flashed once. 4. The communications specialist adjusted the receiver. 3. Hale leaned toward the screen. 2. The icon vanished. The room became still except for the hiss of the radio. Hale kept his hand above the control panel, but the authority in his posture had been replaced by calculation. He looked at Evelyn, not as a clerk standing out of place, but as the only person in the room who had known exactly what would happen. What comes next? He asked. Evelyn pulled the supply form toward her and turned it over. With 3 quick lines, she drew the canyon, the drainage channel, and an abandoned mining trail west of the convoy. The front vehicles will hear enough radio traffic to believe the rear truck has a mechanical problem. If they turn back, the entire convoy enters the dead zone. She pointed to a ridge above the trail. There is one place where an analog signal can clear the canyon wall. Hale glanced at the digital system. We have encrypted communications, and someone prepared for them. Evelyn held out her hand. I need a paper topographic map, a field radio that does not depend on the base network, and every remaining battery from Warehouse 3. Briggs moved before Hale answered. Mia followed him. Toward the door. Hale remained beside the display, staring at the empty space where the last icon had been. "Who taught you to read terrain like this?" he asked. Evelyn continued drawing. Her pencil did not pause. Someone who learned too late that a map can be accurate and still be wrong. Sergeant Briggs returned carrying a canvas radio case, followed by Mia Torres with a rolled topographic map and a metal tray of spare batteries. Evelyn cleared the center table with one sweep of her arm. Supply forms, coffee cups, and route folders slid aside as Mia unrolled the map beneath the overhead light. Unlike the digital display, the paper showed old elevation lines, dry channels, abandoned mining roads, and survey notes made before the rock slide changed the pass. Evelyn placed 2 batteries beside the field radio, checked the contacts, and turned the tuning dial slowly. Static rose and fell like wind through an empty building. "The convoy is here," Hale said, pointing to the last confirmed coordinate. Evelyn moved his hand several inches west. "The system says they are there. The terrain says they have already been pushed here." She marked a narrow shelf beneath the western ridge, then drew a triangle above it and a broken circle near the drainage channel. Colonel Marcus Reed entered as she added 3 short lines along the northern slope. He had been called from an inspection meeting and still carried a closed folder beneath one arm. "Report," he said. Hale began with the route obstruction, the signal failure, and Evelyn's predictions. Reed listened without interruption until his eyes settled on the paper. The folder lowered slowly. "Who drew those symbols?" Evelyn kept working. "I did." Reed stepped closer. The triangle was not a standard elevation mark. The broken circle did not appear in current field manuals. The 3 lines were angled in a way that identified a temporary signal corridor, the kind used when modern systems could not be trusted. Reed had not seen those markings in more than a decade. "Where did you learn Raven Path notation?" he asked. The radio hissed between them. Mia looked from Reed to Evelyn. Briggs stopped sorting the batteries. Even Hale seemed to forget the empty icon on the screen. Evelyn placed the pencil down with deliberate care. "It is only terrain shorthand." "No," Reed said. "It is not." His voice had changed. The command remained, but something older had entered it, something shaped by recognition. He pointed to the broken circle. "That mark means a false safe route. This one means a signal window that lasts less than 2 minutes. Raven Path used them because their maps were often copied by people who did not understand the code." Evelyn rolled one sleeve above her wrist to tighten the radio strap. The motion pulled her collar slightly aside, revealing the edge of a faded compass tattoo near her collarbone. Reed stared at it. 8 narrow points surrounded a small northern star. His face lost its color. "Northstar," he said. The name passed through the operations room more quietly than a whisper, yet everyone heard it. Hale looked at Evelyn as though the warehouse uniform had become a disguise he should have recognized. "That call sign belongs to a route reconnaissance unit," he said. Reed did not take his eyes from her. It belonged to the officer who brought 7 people out of the Gray Basin after every navigation system failed. Evelyn pulled her collar back into place. That name died in another canyon. Reed opened the folder he had carried inside. His security card touched the table terminal, and a restricted record appeared on the smaller screen. Most of the text was hidden, but one line remained visible. "Raven Path. Operational status dissolved." Beneath it was a photograph of a younger Evelyn wearing desert gear, her expression unchanged except for the absence of the quiet exhaustion she carried now. Hale read the single surviving identification line. "Evelyn Mercer, call sign Northstar, field route specialist." He looked toward the main display, where the missing truck remained only an empty space. "Can you reach them?" he asked. Evelyn lifted the analog radio and studied the western ridge on the map. "Not from this room." Outside, Flint raised his head as she turned toward the door. "But there is a trail the new maps forgot." Evelyn crossed the operations yard with the field. Radio over one shoulder and the paper map folded beneath her arm. Flint waited near the fence, his dark coat silvered by dust. She ran one hand along his neck, then checked the leather straps on the saddlebags. Mia followed with the spare batteries and a compact medical kit. "How far is the trail?" she asked. 11 miles from the west gate, Evelyn said. "Vehicles can cover the first 7. Flint has to take me the rest. Hale came through the doorway behind them. I'm going with you. Evelyn turned. You're needed in the operations room. My convoy is in that pass. Then keep them moving when I reach the ridge. Hale looked toward Colonel Reed, expecting support. Reed stood beneath the shade of the building, studying Evelyn with the unsettled expression of someone seeing a name from an old report become human again. She is right, he said. You coordinate from here. Briggs brought a utility vehicle around from the motor pool. As Evelyn loaded the radio, Hale stepped closer. The Gray Basin, he said quietly. What happened there? For a moment, she did not answer. The wind moved across the yard, carrying the faint smell of hot metal and sage. It was the same smell that had followed Raven Path into a canyon 14 years earlier. Their digital map had shown an open route. Their satellite feed had shown no movement. Evelyn had found fresh tracks along the ridge and warned that the basin was being shaped into a trap. Command had told them to continue. By the time the mistake was understood, every approved exit had closed. She had spent 2 nights guiding the survivors through a dry water channel no current map recognized. 7 returned. Her older brother, Captain Daniel Mercer, did not. He had stayed behind to keep the last radio signal alive long enough for her to move the others beyond the ridge. The official report called the mission a navigation failure. Raven Path was dissolved before anyone outside the unit could ask why the first warning had been ignored. Evelyn looked at Hale. A map told us the road was safe, she said. The ground said something else. He lowered his eyes, and no one listened. Not soon enough. Flint shifted beside her, pressing his shoulder lightly against her arm. Evelyn had found him years later near a protected Mustang Range west of the Gray Basin. He was young then, untamed and wary of every hand that reached for him. She had not trained him by forcing obedience. She had waited until he understood that she would listen when he stopped. That was why he noticed changes before most people did. Not because he was extraordinary, but because no one had taught him to ignore what his senses were saying. Briggs started the utility vehicle. Evelyn mounted Flint and took the lead rope loosely in one hand. I will reach Signal Ridge in 40 minutes, she said. When I call, do not question the route. Hale met her gaze. The arrogance was gone. What remained was responsibility. You have my word. Evelyn turned Flint toward the west gate. Behind her, the operations room returned to motion. Ahead, the desert opened in long bands of red earth and black stone. Somewhere beyond those ridges, a convoy waited inside the same kind of silence that had once taken nearly everything from her. This time, the warning had arrived before the loss. The utility vehicle carried Evelyn, Flint, and Sergeant Briggs across the first 7 miles of open desert, where the service road remained wide enough for tires and the land stretched flat beneath a white morning sky. Briggs drove with both hands steady on the wheel, while Evelyn studied the folded map against her knee. Every few minutes, she looked beyond the windshield instead of at the marked route. A dry creek bed curved north. A line of sage leaned west beneath the wind. Black stone began replacing the red soil near the base of Signal Ridge. None of those details appeared on the digital map, but together they told her exactly where the old mining trail began. Stop here, she said. Briggs slowed beside what looked like an ordinary break in the brush. Evelyn unloaded the radio, batteries, water, and medical kit into Flint saddlebags. The Mustang stepped onto the narrow trail without hesitation, placing each hoof carefully between loose stones. Briggs studied the slope rising ahead. That is not a road. It used to be, Evelyn replied. Before, people stopped needing it. She mounted and guided Flint upward while Briggs returned to the base vehicle. The trail narrowed after the first mile. To Evelyn's right, the ground fell toward a dry channel filled with pale rock. To her left, the ridge climbed almost vertically, its surface dark and warm beneath the sun. Flint moved at a measured pace, never wasting energy, never placing weight where the earth sounded hollow. The field radio knocked softly against the saddle with each step. Evelyn listened to that rhythm until the static from 14 years earlier began rising in her memory. She remembered Daniel's voice breaking through interference, telling her to keep moving. She remembered answering that she would return. She remembered the silence that followed. Flint stopped. Evelyn blinked and looked ahead. A section of the trail had collapsed, leaving only a ledge less than 3 feet wide. Loose gravel slid beneath the Mustang's front hoof and disappeared into the channel below. Evelyn did not pull the reins. She lowered one hand to Flint's neck and waited. His ears shifted forward, then left. He stepped backward once, turned toward a patch of sage, and found a higher line around the damaged ledge. "Good," she whispered. "I see it." 20 minutes later, they reached the shoulder of Signal Ridge. Evelyn dismounted and climbed the final 50 yards on foot, leading Flint through scattered stone until the land opened beneath them. Dry Widow Pass lay to the east, cut between black canyon walls. Through binoculars, she found 3 vehicles near the northern bend and 2 farther behind. The final truck sat alone beneath the western ridge, hidden from the others by the curve. No smoke, no visible damage, just separation, confusion, and failing communication. Exactly as planned, Evelyn secured the analog antenna to an old survey post and connected the first battery. The radio answered with static. She adjusted the frequency one careful turn at a time. A weak voice emerged, vanished, then returned. "Kodiak 2-6 to base. Does anyone copy?" Evelyn pressed the transmission switch. "Kodiak 2-6, this is Northstar on Signal Ridge." "I hear you." Silence followed. For half a second. Then Hale's voice broke through from Red Mesa, clear for the first time since the convoy entered the pass. "Northstar, base copies." Evelyn looked across the canyon and traced the forgotten mining road with her eyes. "Keep every vehicle moving," she said. "I'm going to open a way out." Evelyn studied the canyon through the binoculars, then lowered them and placed one finger on the paper map. The convoy had 3 possible exits. 2 were too narrow for the transport vehicles. The third had been buried under a rock slide years earlier, but the old survey lines showed a drainage shelf running behind it. If the drivers followed the visible road, they would remain trapped inside the signal shadow. If they trusted the forgotten route, they could climb above it. "Kodiak 2 lead. Continue north for 300 yards, Evelyn said into the radio. "Do not turn toward the marked service lane." The lead driver answered through static. "That lane is the only route on our display. Your display is wrong." At Red Mesa, Hale stood over the operations table with Colonel Reed, Mia, and Briggs listening. Every instinct shaped by procedure told him to demand confirmation, but confirmation had already failed them. He pressed the transmission switch. "Kodiak 2, follow Northstar's instructions exactly." The words moved through the room with more weight than an apology. Evelyn heard them and returned her attention to the ridge. "Lead vehicle, watch for a split boulder shaped like an open book. Turn west immediately after it." The convoy moved. From Signal Ridge, the trucks looked small against the black stone, but their engines carried faintly through the pass. The first vehicle reached the boulder and slowed. For one dangerous second, it seemed ready to continue straight. Then it turned west. The second followed. The third hesitated at the edge of the drainage shelf. Loose dust rolled beneath its tires. Evelyn measured the angle with her eyes. "Stay close to the uphill side," she said. "There is solid ground beneath the darker rock." The driver adjusted. The vehicle climbed. One by one, the front trucks left the dead zone. Their blue icons reappeared on the operations display, faint at first, then steady. Mia released a breath she had been holding. Hale did not celebrate. 2 vehicles remained behind the bend, including the isolated rear truck. "Kodiak 2-6, report condition," Evelyn called. A voice answered weakly. The truck had not failed. Its navigation system had frozen after the signal dropped, and the driver had stopped rather than risk moving blind. Evelyn looked across the canyon. "You're not blind. Turn your cab toward the western wall. When the sunlight touches your left mirror, move forward at walking speed." The driver followed the instruction. The truck emerged from behind the curve, joined the 5th vehicle, and began the climb. Flint stood beside Evelyn, motionless except for the wind lifting his mane. The final icon returned to the screen at Red Mesa. No one spoke for several seconds. 6 vehicles were visible again. 6 signals were moving south along the upper trail. Hale placed both hands on the table and lowered his head once, not in defeat, but in recognition. All vehicles accounted for, the communications specialist said. Colonel Reed looked toward Hale. Your next order? Hale raised his eyes. Bring them home by Northstar's route. On Signal Ridge, Evelyn changed the radio battery and continued guiding the convoy mile by mile. She did not sound triumphant. She did not remind anyone that she had been right. Her voice remained calm, precise, and almost quiet enough to disappear beneath the static. Yet every driver listened now. Every officer waited for her next instruction. She had not taken command by demanding authority. She had earned it by seeing the exit before anyone else understood they were trapped. The convoy returned to Red Mesa shortly before sunset, 6 vehicles rolling through the western gate beneath a sky the color of copper. No sirens greeted them. No ceremony waited in the yard. Only the low sound of engines, the scrape of tires over packed earth, and the silence of people who understood how close a routine exercise had come to becoming something else. Evelyn arrived later with Flint, following the old trail back at a slower pace. Dust covered her warehouse shirt. The analog radio hung at her side, its final battery nearly empty. Soldiers who had laughed that morning now stepped away from the loading lane and watched her pass. No one spoke until Lieutenant Hale crossed the yard. He stopped several feet in front of her, removed his cap, and stood straight. I ignored evidence because I did not respect where it came from, he said. His voice carried far enough for the convoy crews to hear. That was my failure. Evelyn dismounted and loosened Flint's saddle strap. Then correct the failure. Hale glanced toward the returning vehicles. I owe you an apology. An apology helps one person, she said. A better procedure helps the next convoy. Colonel Reed approached with a folder in one hand. Inside was a recommendation for recognition, temporary field authority, and reinstatement of credentials tied to Raven Path. Evelyn read the first page, then closed it. I do not need my old title back. Reed studied her. You earn more than a title today. Then use it for something useful. The next morning, Warehouse 3 opened before sunrise as it always did. Evelyn checked fuel records, radio batteries, medical supplies, and vehicle seals while Flint stood beneath the shade awning near the fence. The base looked unchanged, but small differences had already begun appearing. Every route inspection now required 2 names instead of 1. Temporary access codes could no longer be issued without identification. Any employee, regardless of rank or job, could place a departure hold when physical evidence conflicted with a route report. Above the dispatch desk, Hale had posted a new line in plain black letters. Field anomalies reported by any personnel must be reviewed before movement. Mia Torres found Evelyn counting battery cases in row 7. They approved the new rule, she said. Evelyn marked the final number on her clipboard. Good. That is all you were going to say? Evelyn looked toward the open loading bay. Outside, Hale was reviewing a paper map with Sergeant Briggs before authorizing the next convoy. This time, he asked the mechanics, drivers, and warehouse staff what they had noticed before he gave the order to move. That is enough, she said. Later, when the first engine started, Flint lifted his head but remained calm. Evelyn listened to the sound, checked the manifest once more, and watched the vehicles leave by the correct road. On Hale's desk lay the same supply form she had used to draw the canyon, now framed beneath a small brass plate. It did not display her rank or her former unit. It carried only one sentence. The warning mattered before the name did. By evening, Evelyn rode Flint along the outer fence as the sun lowered behind Signal Ridge. The base lights came on one by one behind her. She did not look back for salutes, recognition, or applause. Respect had arrived quietly, not as a reward, but as a change in the way people listened. And that was the only kind she trusted.